Welcome. You are watching Session 1 of the Hot AI Summer Panel Discussion Series, Demystifying AI for Cybersecurity Professionals.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff event of our Hot AI Summer Panel Discussion Series. I'm David Petco, President of the San Diego chapter of ISSA, and I'll be your host tonight as we dive into one of the most exciting and, frankly, most misunderstood topics in cybersecurity today: artificial intelligence. We're thrilled to see so many new faces alongside our regulars for over 60 attendees here in person, as well as many more joining virtually for this hybrid event. Whether you're here to network with your peers, grow your career, or maybe just check out how cyber professionals are tackling the sea of opportunities and threats that AI is presenting us with, you're in the right place. When I looked at planning this series, the starting point, as is with all of our programming, was how do we best serve the community? We look at what topics are most important to our members, find great leaders that can speak to their real world experiences, and infuse some fun into it, as you can tell by the name. Hot AI Summer is a three-part series designed for practitioners, leaders, and curious minds across cybersecurity to explore how AI is impacting the way we build, defend, grow, and lead in our field. This isn't just another theoretical AI talk. We aren't just going to talk about what threats are out there. This series is about providing you with the tactical advice to enable your organizations with a secure path to adopt AI successfully. So here's what to expect throughout the series. Session 1 tonight is called Demystifying AI for Cybersecurity Pros. We'll clear the fog around terms like agentic AI, machine learning, LLMs, hallucinations, and more, so that everyone can quickly get on the same page, whether you've been avoiding AI or building your own agents. More importantly, we'll jump into current use cases and how our panelists are managing this paradigm shift within their organizations. Session 2 in August is going to be Breaking Governance with AI Risk. Session 3 in September is Adversarial AI Threats and SecOps Automation. You're not going to want to miss any of these, so make sure you add them to your calendar ASAP. Now, here's how tonight will work. We've already handled check-in for in-person attendees, and as a quick housekeeping note, the bathrooms are located directly to the right when exiting this room. And please make sure to grab your food and beverages before the panel begins if you've not already done so. Jillian, please check in with the virtual attendees now that we're officially streaming live. After we wrap up the introductions, our panel will jump right into the discussion. So feel free to ask any questions. Don't be shy. These panels greatly benefit from audience Q&A, and that goes for the people online as well. Finally, we'll close out tonight with some networking, so please make sure to stick around and meet some new people. And some quick reminders, please email or connect with somebody on the board if you'd like to highlight an open role, sponsor one of these fantastic events, or volunteer to give back to this community through mentorship or joining one of our committees. You know, we're growing, and your involvement helps to build the cybersecurity community here in San Diego. Our next happy hours will be at the beautiful Carl Strauss Beer Garden in Sorrento Valley on August 13th and September 10th. Session 2 of this panel series is scheduled for August 28th at KPMG, and Session 3 is slated for September 25th at Light Edge Data Center. You can always find the latest info under upcoming events on our website at sdissa.org. If you're not yet a member of SDISA, please connect with our membership director to hear more about what we are up to. In addition to the special interest groups, publications, and partner discounts from ISSA International, members receive a ton of benefits from our local chapter. First and foremost, all of these meetings are free for members, which quickly pays for itself when you consider that we host 2 on average each month for roughly 25 events annually. As I mentioned previously, start with our website, sdissa.org, to learn more. Our email newsletter is your safest bet. And if you prefer to stay updated via social media, we're on LinkedIn, X, and Facebook currently. A huge thanks to our board of directors and volunteers. We have board members Jillian Olds on the camera, as well as Giri Santi, David Myers, and myself in the room tonight. Let's give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, this series would not be possible without the support from our generous sponsors. Thank you to our annual gold partners, Impelix Services, Cato Networks, and Network Quotes. A special shout out to Rapid Scale for hosting tonight's dinner for such a large crowd. Would you like to share a few words?
Oh, I don't want to be on camera. No, thank everybody for coming today, and we're excited to talk to you. Love this topic. Rapid scale, we have AI. We support customers with building out, designing, building out AI, as well as optimization in public and private cloud. There's a lot of things that we do. If anybody's interested, we'd love to have the time to talk to you. But again, my name's Dale Janae, and I will be here. And I'm excited to listen to these guys talking as well.
Thanks again, Dale. Now, without further ado, let's meet our amazing panel. Please give a warm welcome to tonight's moderator, Billy Norwood.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Billy Norwood. I am the CISO for F Enterprises, which none of you have probably heard of. But we're out of Temecula. We're a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical distribution company. So basically like Baby McKesson or Amerisource, they're our main competitors. So we're kind of mixed across the US mostly, but we are embarking on our AI journey. So I thought that it would be fun for to kind of go with the hot AI summer theme. So anyone else who's wearing Hawaiian shirts, props to you guys for making sure to show up for the hot AI summer. But I'll let each one of the panelists introduce themselves.
My name is Melanie Thomas. I am the VP of Cybersecurity for a company called Bridgepointe Technologies. It's a tech advisory firm. I'm also a professor, so I also teach at the University of San Diego for a master's in cybersecurity operations and leadership. And then here in the county, I'm also the president currently for B-Side San Diego.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Hicks. Until very, very recently, I was the CIO and CISO at Sanford, Burnham, Prebys Medical Discovery Institute. We are not a law firm. We are an early stage medical research, primarily NIH funded, a 501c3. It's cancer research and Alzheimer's research, liver disease, all sorts of very, very early stage preclinical work. We also have partnerships with pharma, and we sort of look at potential clinical targets and things like that. Prior to that, I was at a company called Biogen, and before that, Biogen, which is they are drug manufacturers. I've worked in 21 CFR 11 and GMP and that sort of thing for lab. For drug manufacturing, and before that, I was at a company called Akamai Technologies. I was in charge of their streaming CD division, managing 20,000 Linux and Windows servers around the globe to stream content to folks years ago. And before that, a variety of manufacturing companies, and that's the elevator pitch.
Steve Williamson, so also recently the CIO at Abzena. It's a contract development manufacturing organization for biotech. So everything from basic research to full-scale bioproduction. I worked prior at Illumina, and like Eric, I also worked at Biogen prior to that. So I've been making drugs in some form or fashion for several decades, and the systems and technology around that.
Hi, my name is Alex Neff. I am Senior Director of Information Security, as well as Quality Compliance IT. I work for a smaller software company called Faro Help. We help in the clinical trial generation process for pharma companies. I'm also a professor at Arizona State University. I've built and teach their cloud computing. And last, I am on the board of ISACA San Diego.
Now, without further ado, let's meet our amazing panel. Please give a warm welcome to tonight's moderator,
thank you, everybody.
Billy Norwood.
So I would say for the past couple of years, we've been talking about AI a lot. So I get a show of hands. My feel in general is I'm proud of our San Diego community. I feel like a lot of our people here are fairly technical. So I kind of want to kind of figure out where people are in their AI journey. Do you guys feel like just experimenting right now? Got some. I mean, I'm there, honestly. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Do people feel like pretty comfortable with it? A lot of their companies or themselves use it day to day. Do we have experts out there that need to take my place up here? You're already here. But yeah, okay, all right. I just want to kind of get an idea of where people are at, so we can kind of start. You know, because I've gone to a lot of these, and someone's like, "What's the difference between machine learning and Gen AI?" So unless someone wants to hear that, I'm going to kind of skip that part, and just kind of dive in a little bit to kind of what we're talking about. Because I think what we really need to focus on is like AI can do a lot for us, but there's a lot of risks around AI. And I think we all have different viewpoints, being a smaller firm. Our firm, we're not like huge, but we're ancient and we move slow. So I have some viewpoints on kind of how we move there as well. And I bet as a consulting firm, you guys walk around and you talk to a lot of people on how they're moving through AI. Does anyone want to kick us off?
So my first comment would be around what is related to Sanford, Burnham, Prebys. One of the challenges that we're in the process of implementing an AI proof of concept with 2 products. There's a lot of great products out there. We elected to use Microsoft Copilot on the administrative side for administrative tasks, and ChatGPT on the scientific research side, scientific research side is really, really interesting. What's hard, and I don't know how much this applies to all of you, not-for-profit research institutes have many, many different kinds of information. And by different kinds of information, I mean information with different levels of intellectual property protection. So even aside from bad actors potentially getting access to it or whatever, our big issue is grant information is going to eventually become public. Anyway, that's the deal with the NIH. You do research and then it becomes the property of all of our taxpayers. However, information that is with a partnership with, say, Eli Lilly is very not public. And so you have to be very careful about what you put into these models and understand what the legal are going with this. What the legal controls are around that. And I think the AI industry is moving so quickly and in many ways is so undefined, particularly in a regulatory way. It's very uncertain, particularly one of the advantages I would say a regular commercial enterprise has is your information is private. Like it's just private. Whereas we have PII for employee, we have all these different levels of information. So that's
I have one complication.
Yes.
So you're in a similar situation to us, that we have multiple agencies, companies giving us grants. So your Eli Lilly example, you don't want to share that with Bristol Myers Squibb or vice versa. You may be restricted in not using each other's to help one or the other. So there's some other complications.
The complications of them not using the company private AI.
right. And people will go use ChatGPT on their own. And you have to understand what you're doing with that. And it's just you just need to be very clear on what are the restrictions around the information you're putting out there, and what are the rules around when they get a hold of it, they meaning ChatGPT, your Copilot, remember, what are they required to do with it? And what are their protections against bad actors?
Yeah, just and just to bring it up a notch, and then I have a specific question for you. You probably have things you want to say already. Just like to bring it up a notch, obviously we probably all have heard, oversharing to something in a public space, right? Or the hallucination. So these are all the things that we're working about. And I think you guys already know this. And if not, we can talk more about that. But we're just kind of diving in because I think we hear a lot of the high level, but we're not really hearing what everyone sees. And I think while we're talking about some of the risks, I think one of the interesting things, and maybe we're diving into it a little early, is like when you talk with people, like how do you train somebody? How do you train one of the guys who's in finance who's using financial data, which is very sensitive, but they're like at home and they're using ChatGPT for everything, but you're a Copilot shop. How do you train people to use the right thing and get them comfortable with, using the company Copilot? How do you align them to that? I'm sure that's very part of some of your guys' implementation process.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's is a little bit different, right? So just like everyone has their own specialty, they want to use Windows versus Linux versus what have you, right? Part of it is a business decision, and that's very much part of the conversation. And part of it is how are your users actually going to use it? So even if you have the best of intentions for any project, right? You want to release something new. Let's say you want to do a password manager, and let's say we want to switch things up and use Duo instead and try to do all these really good projects for the betterment of security, right? For the ease of our users. If they hate it, it's going to fail anyway. So part of these are kind of business decisions to say, what is our use case? How can we best bring that with our employees? And your company is the ones that know your employees the best, right? So how do we make sure that what we're implementing is right for the company? And then a lot of it's going to be top down. And so we talk a lot about change champions, for example, and solution champions, where even if you sometimes hate it,
Now,
so
without
I'm not a big
further
fan of
ado,
AI, for
let's meet our
example,
amazing
that
panelists.
if
Please
you
give a
use
warm
it in the
welcome
right
to
way,
tonight's
and we're saying,
moderator,
hey, this
Billy
isn't
Norwood.
going to be replacing your job. We're doing this to make it faster. And here's some really great things that you can do with that and try to help kind of guide that conversation, guide the mindset. That can also be really helpful. Some of that's really strategy based and looking at what are exactly the use cases that we need to be using it for, what do our people want to be using it for, and then how can we help make sure that's correct. The last thing you want to do is start spending $400,000, $500,000 creating your own special AI just for it to kind of go up in flames 5 years later.
Yeah, so we're kind of touching across the top of everything. So we're kind of talking about like people that are using AI, maybe a little bit on the business side, but specifics. So for you, like your company is very heavy in use internally. So how does the department look at it? Like how does IT look at that versus like our average finance leader, as I was mentioning?
Well, I'll just say this, as IT, it's terrifying. Every single software is now an AI product. It doesn't matter what kind of project it was, it now has AI built into it. Half of them are like, by the way, there's AI. Sorry, you don't like it, go away. And it's a big challenge because ultimately, if you're trying to contain where AI can touch data, you're having less and less control over that because all these software companies are throwing in your direction. And ultimately, the reason we have any software is because we're trying to provide value to users, we're trying to enable them to perform things. And trying to match security along with enablement right now is a pretty big challenge because, again, everything's changing so quickly. Ultimately, making sure that people are informed and they understand software procurement process, they understand why AI can be dangerous is usually the best way to start. AI isn't anything new there. Making sure you have an informed user base is always important for securing data. Having good data governance in place. AI can touch this kind of data, but not this kind. We have a lot of customers that are some of the same companies that these guys have probably worked at in their career. We're in pharma companies who, if we let their data touch AI without their explicit approval, we would quickly no longer have them as a customer. So we have to be very careful.
Might meet their lawyers.
Yeah. And we take it very seriously in my organization. We have to, because we're an AI company. We have to make sure that we have a very good, strong story for how we manage data and how that data is going to be processed. One thing that I would say is that we do leverage, well-known organizations like Azure and AWS and a lot of the LLM companies that provide to them, because we can offload a lot of the security concerns onto that third party because they put a lot of effort into securing those things. So there's strategies you can take to make sure that you are secure, but you do have to take a step back and think, where is data touching, AI, and then make sure that you have a good strategy for making sure that it doesn't touch it.
So interesting question for everybody. Obviously consulting a little different, but like when did your teams decide AI is a thing? Because my CEO is like, hell no, we're not doing that crazy stuff. Like that's obviously that's just information leaks. This is bad. This is no. And then all of a sudden he's like, let's do it. So like I literally had no budget for this year to do anything about protecting against AI because he's like, we're absolutely not doing that thing. And then in like April, he's like, okay, we're doing it. And now I'm like scrambling. Where do I shift budget? Where do I make this happen? So do you guys have a story that really sold the company for AI? For us, there's some very basic stuff. My PM team wanting like meeting transcription was such a big push. But the really we're on our pharmaceutical division because there's a lot there that they deal with insurance that's super manual, and in the way that they can kind of get some of that data done ahead of time so that they can make quicker, faster decisions, not have to do manual review of insurance claims. So we're talking all PHI now. So like then now I'm like behind the 8 ball on this. But that's kind of what kind of started pushing us was our pharmacy division and the PM team.
I have a very straightforward story about this. I remember exactly what happened. And my experience with AI is with Sanford Burnham SVP. I'm going to say SVP because that's what's in how I say it in my head. Before that, AI wasn't really a thing. I was at SVP. It came completely from our researchers. Our administrative folks in finance and HR, they probably still aren't really interested in it. They just want to do the job they've done. It's finance, debits and credits. No offense to anybody, it's all finance here. But our researchers that do large scale big data genomics research, they demanded it. And I said, similar to you, I don't have a budget for that. And they said, that's not really my problem. They said, we need this, and you either figure out how to get it for us institutionally, or we're going to do it. And then my risk meter hit 10. And I said, okay. And I went to my bosses and said, what we get like, we're either going to ride this horse or this horse is going to trample us. So, and we found the money.
So as a startup, right now it's AI or die. Almost every startup that's being created right now is starting off fully AI because you can go way faster. Now, what does that mean for quality? Well, that's a whole nother story. There's lots of arguments out there one way or the other. But as a company that's been around for 4 or 5 years in the software world, we're having to go way faster just to keep up with the competition. Now, I think we're in a great spot because we have quality systems in place and can maintain that, but it's definitely a challenge and it's putting the impetus on us to go faster. And it's helping us go faster. But we are having to make sure that we balance that sufficiently with quality and security, because ultimately you can go so fast, but you don't want to be introducing tons of security vulnerabilities and bad product along the way.
Yeah, so I'll do one for Bridgepointe, and I've come from a couple customers too.
Yeah.
But for internally at Bridgepointe, we got it from the higher ups. So we got it from the people who give lots of money, right? The kind of people who own us, our venture capitalist firms, whoever invests. And then we hear it from all of our strategists, so all of our consultants, on we need to be able to move faster. So that's the same idea. So as tech consultants, at Bridgepointe, we do everything up and down the technology stack. So you name it, we'll be able to match a partner and a solution with it. And that's really complicated, right? So just in cybersecurity alone, there are over 15,000 different technologies and providers and solutions, right? That's already too many. And then to be like, oh, well, a customer needs X, Y, Z. They actually hate Microsoft. We're point solutioning all the way, but they're going to also open up an office in Ireland. We're helping a data center right now stand up in Uzbekistan. And all of those conversations are different, right? And so we're thinking, how can we do AI? Our leadership decided, let's just turn on AI inside of Zoom and inside of Salesforce and inside of Office 365. And we couldn't say no fast enough. So part of it is we didn't have a strong use case. We weren't telling it exactly what data to look at, and we weren't telling it why we wanted it to look at that data, right? So we're not telling it as someone who's trying to solution, or it could be as someone who's trying to learn these things, as someone who's trying to sell a particular solution. Those are all kind of different mindsets that we as humans would come at those kinds of questions differently, right? Than just in general, scan all of these PDFs and tell me something about that, right? That's not going to be a good use of our investment in those kinds of tools. And so that's kind of where I'm continuing to battle that battle, but it's still important, right? So we want to make sure that we get good ROI while adopting and telling people who we have to answer to, yes, we're doing a flavor of AI. That'll work for us.
Yes. Yeah.
So similar to what Eric talked about, the executive team was very uninterested in investing in that area. But we're private equity owned and PE firm demanded that we have some form of AI project, which was sort of helpful and a lot of not so helpful. But what we found is similar to what I heard the others is you roll out Copilot, the training that Billy was talking about is a big issue. And say maybe 15–20% of the people really invested the effort to learn the tools, even with direct Microsoft engineer support. And most of the folks were very frustrated very quickly. It's like 10–15 minutes, I'm not touching this again. But as Eric pointed out, in the research area, we had quite a few senior scientists who really loved the tools, scientific literature research. I know I worked on a project like this sometime before. Can you go find it? Can you summarize the materials? It's very, very helpful. Because you have 10 years of work on a SharePoint site or SharePoint sites, trying to get to that, find the right file, summarize that in any meaningful way is very difficult. And AI does that really well. So we found some very interesting use cases that were providing value. But the sort of, Alex, you and I were talking about this before the session, but by giving it to everybody and saying, here you go, was not what we did and not what I would advocate. I think the licenses add up, and if you're not going to use it, it's not good expenditure.
We actually had great success on the administrative side. I didn't attempt to tell the scientists this is how you should use ChatGPT for your research, because that wouldn't have ended well, because I don't have a PhD in anything. But on the administrative side, rather than give them the tool and say, here you go, tell me what you think, we got a couple of champions in each department, came up with some use cases, like, we're doing this thing, this is a good application of it, this is a good application of that, and then you get a group of them together and you say, okay, do it the regular way. How long did it take? Do it using Copilot. How long did that take? What are some advantageous ways you could use it? When you measure that, that also demonstrates a good ROI to the folks upstairs.
Yeah, we'll not have another one.
Sorry.
I would say that ultimately these are all just tools. And like anything else, if you use the tool properly, it'll work out for you. And one of the things that's really crazy is these models are getting that much better, that much quicker right now. And you can try something today and, Copilot, go do this, and it doesn't do it properly. And in 2 weeks, it might do it. You don't really know. It's constantly changing. So it's important that people understand that they have to use these tools in a certain way to get that value. So having training, and I think, being security minded, adding security training in as well, to get that value add as well. You can get people really bought into hopefully having security in their workflow, understand the workflow, make these tools successful. And if you just throw it out there and ask people to use it, they'll look at it, shrug, try it out once or twice, it won't do what they think it should, and then they'll try it again. And you have to constantly be training, constantly be showing value. And that's where having champions really helps. If you get champions and you have people who they respect in their day-to-day saying, yes, this will definitely help you with the research, then people will start using it.
So Alex, you and Eric brought up the thing too, that the models give different answers. And you brought up, like, we use ChatGPT for this, and like Copilot's got a lot of trademark things. So you run into issues very quickly trying to manipulate photos, but ChatGPT doesn't give you that restriction. So maybe you want to elaborate a little on that?
So I'll definitely say the more rocket ships and check marks, the more accurate it is. If you've actually used it, you'd understand what I'm saying, but there's a certain way you have to use these tools to make sure they don't hallucinate. And there's basically something called a context window. And that context window is the amount of information you can throw at one of these tools before it starts hallucinating. And you have to really put a lot of effort into managing that context window. So for example, instead of saying, oh, well, go make this code change in our code base. It's going to go look around the code base. It's going to forget what the question was in the first place and then start doing whatever it feels like it should do halfway through. Instead, you should say, go make a change in this specific spot, doing this specific thing, referencing these two documents. You get into where it has this little tiny amount that's going into the context window and has all this other space to figure out how to make that change. There's a lot of strategies you can use to really make these tools extremely valuable, but they will do horrible things if you let them. So for example, if I ask them to make code-based changes, hopefully I'm not doing it in production. Hopefully I'm not having it touch production systems. You have to be very structured in how you approach this from a security and just from a use perspective to get that value from it.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add, and this is a little bit of a digression, one of the things that I struggle with, and I suspect the other three folks here do too, four folks here do, is AI has so much hype around it. It reminds me, for those of us old enough to remember the internet in 1997 and 1998, it's this enormous hype times 10, and people hear that and they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss the bus. And it encourages people to what I like to call ready, fire, aim. And that's a tough thing. It can be really tough. That's not really what we're talking about, but I think it's important to mention.
No, I think that's a lot of what we're talking about, right? Because when we started this conversation, like this last round of talks, right, we're talking about business cases. And a lot of us, we're hearing something from some executive group or some other piece of area or customer or strategist that has a lot of power and says, we have to go forward. We're missing out. And if you actually look at the articles, some people are like 30%. Everyone's getting, if you read anything now, everyone's getting fired. AI's got everyone's job. And then you read like Gartner and it's like, yeah, all these guys that went into AI, yeah, they're seeing like 8% returns. So it's like, well, what do we do here? So it's a lot, especially, as senior security leaders, like where we have to spend time with the people who manage IT, the people who manage data, the compliance officer, legal, and help them. Hopefully they're on your steering committee and help them rein in the executives that just want to go nuts wild and just keep going. And to ensure that we kind of do this in a smart fashion. You mentioned champions, and that is a great point, right? Because we're talking about hallucinations, we're talking about which services to use. And if you can have directors and folks across your company to, again, it is expensive. It can get real expensive. So you get that limited amount of licenses. You try it across the board with those people that they elect as champions to help train, to help make the documentation, to make the average person who, like me, isn't touching enough yet, outside of planning vacations with ChatGPT. Hey, New York City's a big place. I need to know where to eat. So if anyone has any recommendations. But yeah, no, like that's you have to have those type of things to kind of step it forward. And so like that's the biggest thing I'm doing with my boss, the CIO, is ensuring that he can show the executive team that we're moving forward and making those goals, but yet, like baby steps as I can and preventing what risk I can along the way. So that's it's very difficult to kind of go through that. I'm just going to open up real quick for a couple questions because I think it's a good time for it before we kind of dive back into some more discussion. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably.
Oh, okay. The person earlier was saying about the 98, 99 times, or the 5 years.
Oh, internet 1999.
Yeah, the whole, and then what occurred with the .com bubble. I was looking at.
That's what it was called. Back in the 1900s.
Do you foresee, it sounds like it's a too relevant to the overall conversation, but do you foresee a similar thing happening with the current AI, et cetera, and there being a potential AI bubble as there was for the .com bubble?
This is just my opinion. Oh, sorry. This is just my opinion. I'm not giving any kind of advice. I think so to some extent. I think there will be I think there are a lot of people who jumped into it because they want to be buzzword compliant. And I think there will be a shakeout. I think honestly, the other, and this is totally off topic, quantum computing combined with AI is a really, that's a really interesting or terrifying. But so to actually answer your question, absolutely. I think the AI boom it is big and but there will be a crash. But then there will be, there's a real thing behind it.
Yeah, I think .com bomb, price is not really
the technical one. I mean, yeah, we were talking about the technology. I mean, that was like a more from a financial.
100%.
So people can throw the money into that, but
Absolutely.
now the people are not throwing the money, but they are
Right.
throwing their entire business
Right.
processes and
Yeah.
so that's where I think the security and all these predisposition of your business. I mean, for example, you said about all these.
Right. I mean, we still had to teach people how to use Google search and to convince people that certain things on the internet are not real. And also don't post certain things on the internet because everyone can see it. And we were having the exact same conversation again. And people are like, what?
And to answer the other question, let's jump in, but yes, there was an internet bust, but as we've kind of noticed, the internet's still here. It's still big. It's bigger than it was in 2001. So no, AI is not going away by.
I think if anything, it's going to continue to shape the way that we think and approach problems. And I think we need that anyway, right? It's not really often that we have big, significant paradigm shifts of anything. And so we also want to think the same thing with AI. AI, let's say, is very shiny right now. AI is ML, is all these other data sciences with fancy software on top of that, and a lot of resources behind it, right? So everything powering what you're using for AI is still somebody else's computer, right? It's just moving things faster, it's processing faster in a different way. So it's going to help us continue to evolve the way we approach problems, evolve how quickly we generate data. So I think there's a statistic now that there's been so much data generated in the last, 5 years or something, than the totality of the internet. So it's significant amounts of data. And then what of this do we actually need, right? There's all these different approaches and the impact of the environment. And you can go on and on about kind of some of the other ramifications. But if anything, it's going to help us continue to, I think, evolve the way we approach problems, evolve the way we communicate. And just kind of eventually it will be something that we all just accept. Like we all accept endpoint solutions. I mentioned this earlier. It was super fancy and super exciting several years ago, right? And now it's like, oh yeah, everybody has an endpoint. And then we move on to something else. So I think quantum computing will be interesting, but I think it's reminding us that the more we innovate, the more everyone has to continue to think about speed and how safe is that and how comfortable we are with that. Not everyone's going to love AI. Again, I don't necessarily love it, but it's going to continue to shape the way that we approach problems across any part of our society, not just technology.
There will be fewer players, fewer bigger players.
So we have a microphone now for the audience. We're going to pass it around.
Check.
Here we go.
I'm kind of still new to AI, but I understand the whole ecosystem of data. If you're sharing your IP, how does that prevent it from going to other companies being a tech product? Say if it was Alphabet or Microsoft to other competing companies, even in red teaming operations too, when you're trying to limit exposure to data. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I should probably repeat that.
No, I heard you. So how do we prevent our data from going to that third party company? And it's one thing to talk about talk about the Googles and the Azures, Microsoft and things like that. But if you think fourth party risk management was hard, think about and we'll get into build versus buy because that's what I want to talk about next once we get there. But think about all these small startup companies that are like, oh yeah, when we've got AI already, it's hooking up into this ChatGPT version 4. It's cool. Well, how cool is it, man? What's in your legal documents? What is your contract with them? If there's a data breach that can come all the way back to me, so I can hold you accountable. And if you're, just a couple $1 million company, and I'm a several $1 billion company, what does that mean? So that's scary. Really getting down into that. Sometimes I get annoyed because I'll have someone in auditing be like, well, we really need to tell Microsoft. I'm like, we're not going to tell Microsoft, but some of these smaller parties are these couple steps, I can barely keep up with our normal third parties, let alone chase down what does your contract look like between these two people. So for me, that's a big thing. And when we start talking build versus buy, I think we'll dive into that a bit more.
There are 3 protections to your data. This is well. There are 3 protections to your data off the top of my head. There's what are the legal contractual protections? How much is that vendor adhering to them? Because ultimately, a contract is only as good as your ability to enforce it. And what is that vendor's security policies to protect your data? And well, maybe it's more, and are they following them? And are they, other than that, to answer your question, those are the only protections. Other than that, it's on the internet.
It's their data now.
They control your data. A lawyer would say, no, it's not their data, unless the contract says it is. What's in the contract? That's all that matters.
So if you look at OpenAI and the history of OpenAI, like every 6 months, there was another incident where somehow information was leaking between customers. And this put a lot of distrust into AI systems in terms of the way they secure data. But the thing is AI is no different than any other third party when it comes to data. If you give them data, you don't trust them, then why are you giving them data? If you do trust them, then trust but verify. Make sure that they actually are protecting your data. And if you can't afford to trust but verify, well, hopefully you can find out people who can verify for you. Leverage that. So, if you're using the AWSs or Azures or IBMs of the world, the bigger organizations, hopefully there's enough other people out there who are verifying. So where you yourself cannot verify, you can leverage others' verifications. You just gotta try your best. But if you don't trust who you're handing off your data to, then you're already making a mistake.
Just thought of one other thing. And I'm reminded of kind of an adjacent example, which is some or all of you may know, the 23andMe has recently been sold. And for those of us who I did not, rightly or wrongly, give them your data, when a company gets sold, now you're under this new company's rules, which you didn't, when you signed that contract, it wasn't with Bob, it was with Fred. So that's a whole, that's actually really frightening. That the companies get sold.
Also, yes. And part of that, the governance is a little bit kind of extended on top of third-party governance that we're already worried about, right? So there's specifically ways to track specifically AI governance. So now it's not just the data that we're already worried about and the third parties that we're already worried about. It's specific AI. Now it's going to have its own regulations. It'll have some mapped, right, to other pieces of regulation that we're more comfortable with. But it's also going to have its own, right? We also have to worry about data sovereignty issues depending on where you operate, things like that that are only going to continue to add more and more. So while we're generating tons of data, we're protecting tons of data and hopefully processing it correctly, there are still ways to attack some of these things. And we're talking about validating our third parties. If we're not comfortable with that AI company yet, we want to ask, we all want to say SOC 2 type 2, right? Sure. Yes, absolutely. We want to make sure everybody's secure and they're doing the due diligence. There's also things that we can make sure that from an AI perspective, we ask more questions about. So yes, ask inventory all of your vendors and what kind of AI they're using and what of your data is going to be generating into their AI models. So you can have private, right, where it's just yours, but a little bit's always going to go up to, right, the daddy corporation, and they're going to look at it in different ways. That's going to help them inform their business decisions for their partners and their customers, right? So there's different ways we want to make sure that we're scrambling the data, that we're masking the data in a different way, so that even if your data ends up in those clouds, it's not specifically the data that you have to answer to. Because as you, as a customer, right, signing that vendor contract, at the end of the day, you're still responsible. Whether or not that vendor did the right thing, we can prove that. We love litigation in this country anyway. We can always go down all of those avenues, but there are definitely ways that we can kind of get really nitty gritty and ask a lot of vendors difficult questions, and we should be. Right? We want to make sure that we're protecting our data.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do 2 more questions and then we'll get back into it.
Yeah, quick question. At the beginning, I heard a lot of conversation around just like buy-in and stakeholders and all that jazz. Someone that's kind of coming into that sort of role, leading a small sales team, meeting tracker for those PMs, I'm trying to get the buy-in from that. My VP's all in. So I've been kind of tasked, we need to get buy-in from the CSO, from XYZ person as well. How would you go about that?
So I think along the things, especially with the PM piece, I pushed on them was, how do you need this? Because I mean, we've already been recording meetings forever, and I've honestly never watched a single recorded meeting in my life. I'm not good at it. I'm like, write it up for me. So the transcript is amazing idea for me, but like, we got to delete that, at some point. So I think data retention around that and like how it's going to be used. But you have to you have to have like a kind of a set of criteria for everybody. Like, and you guys probably have something better than me. I'm just gonna say like the stuff off my top of my head, right? Like it's like you have to get the customer's consent before you click on that. Step one for, on the sales side. But you also have to be like, what meetings are you allowed to have this on? That's one big thing. Like if you guys are discussing pricing, internally that could get out to competitor, maybe that can't be recorded, right? So you got to figure out this is where we can, this is where we can't, and you got to train people on what to do. I'm going to let anyone else throw a couple in on there.
Well, I find often it is very helpful in things people don't really want to do. So you talk about the transcript. So what did you do before? Somebody was the note taker and they took horrible notes and then you're not paying attention to conversation. So now you've eliminated that burden. So finding things like that where it assists them in doing requirements of their job. If you have time tracking and you have a simpler way of doing it using the AI tool, that's an easy way to get buy-in. Never try to boil the ocean coming out the gate. Pick a couple of those examples and then they'll be excited, well, what else can it do for me? Where else can it make my life easier? And I have to write memos to vendors. It has to be a little formal using Copilot to write a very solid first draft. It saves me hours. And that's not my, creative writing wasn't my any something. No,
I actually did very well creative writing.
I do love creative writing. And from the teaching perspective, I don't. I've always loved when students don't use creative writing, but you can absolutely tell that when those topics are kind of connecting, it makes it a whole different conversation when it kind of gets you there a little bit faster. From the business tools perspective as well, to kind of call back to that one, for example, in the recordings and some of these recording platforms like Zoom, I think also has it. They have so many new companies that now have the opportunity to create a solution to help with all of those AI questions, right? So now we have even more new companies being created, which is fantastic, to say, hey, we're going to scrub the AI, we're going to scrub those recordings, we're going to scrub the transcripts, and we're going to identify areas that might be specific to your IP that you don't want to get out, right? Specific to pricing, like you mentioned, things we don't necessarily want to be searchable inside of Office 365, things like that inside of these documents. And so it's also creating opportunity to pivot a little bit in how we approach these. It makes things a little bit more complex. But if we're talking about DLP, right, data loss prevention, or increasing our resources behind DSPM, or data security posture management in general, it helps to say, okay, well, we can plug in some of these solutions. So it's not necessarily anymore about buying anything out of the box and it's somebody else's problem. And all we have to do is, all these different flags and it's fine. A lot of these are just getting a little bit more complicated. So we want to put a little bit more strategy and effort into planning where we want to turn things on. But ultimately, it helps us think a little bit more creatively about it, even though it's never going to be one thing out of the box. You're buying one vendor to handle everything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a business decision and you're saving money, right? And so it's money versus risk. And that's just something that they will understand. That might be hard for you to pitch this, so, but, VP of sales probably can push it. Yeah. I mean, but there's other things that maybe you don't need to mention exactly to him, but they can help you with it, right? Like if my complaining, but like if people held meetings correctly. And so like at the end, they're like, these are the takeaways. If someone actually says that makes it way easier and way clearer for the AI to get the right stuff down and not write down something weird, right? Because if everyone actually does that, we're like, this is the meeting agenda at the beginning, this is the meeting takeaways, then you're guiding the AI. You talked about not having just an open playing field for it, but guiding it. Like that, that's a training thing, maybe not mention that maybe we should just have meetings better because you're missing out on what you're trying to win. But think about that when you do get to the implementation piece. All right, we have time for one more. Go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering if the panel is also having, usually like I'm having, in the first decade when virtual machines and cloud came up, and a lot of companies said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll never do that. Never put anything in the cloud. We'll never virtualize your physical systems. But then eventually they saw the value prop and they started flipping to doing that. So I'm seeing a lot of deja vu on what's being discussed with the AI adoption now with what happened in the first decade with virtual machines and cloud.
Yeah, and I'll make one comment and I'll pass it along. One thing I see there is in virtual machines and cloud is how easy it is to spin something up and just start going. Right. So if you don't have your guardrails, you don't have your golden image, you don't have the things put in place ahead of time, then it can go off the rails really fast. So that's easy statement. And I'll let others.
Oh, same. Yeah. Same thing with AI, right? The more strategy we put into it, the better it's going to be on the far end. Garbage in, garbage out is also when we talk about security. It's the same idea there, right? We're feeding it garbage, it's going to give us garbage until we train it and tell it what to do. But in the shift of that, I do try to put across to my customers as well that kind of same idea that so many people were on-prem and they want to say, okay, well, now there's this cloud thing, which is really somebody else's computer somewhere. We're actually going to host it there and reduce our risk over here. Didn't save anybody money. When you go into Microsoft, that's definitely not going to save you money in the cloud, right? To put that somewhere else. But we're also seeing now customers who did pivot hard into the cloud are going back to diversifying that. So they're going back to on-prem, they're going back to data centers, because ultimately that wasn't the best thing for their business strategy and their dollars. They're saying, well, for resiliency's sake, for right, all these other things that we're now worried about, we want to make sure that we have easier and faster recovery. We're spending too much money on cloud providers to do some of that more human-centric work, recover specific servers, things like that, that was just kind of didn't end up making sense in the long run. So we see more customers now reversing and kind of going back to something a little bit more skill set matching, things like that, as we battle a lot of reducing budgets and kind of where can we best continue to support the business and balance our total resources, right? Money and humans and time.
Just quickly, I haven't seen the kind of wholesale attempt to adopt AI, adopt the cloud as I am seeing with AI, mostly because companies that I've been involved with, some of it, you're really moving a lot of costs from CapEx to OpEx by moving from on-prem to cloud. You know, CapEx, and if that's what the company wants to do, that's one thing. The other piece of cloud that has sometimes legitimately caused companies to pause vendor lock-in, because moving between cloud providers is non-trivial. And you get to a point where, you know, if you fall on really hard times and you don't pay the cloud vendor, you turn your water off, and that is catastrophic. Whereas at least on-prem, I've had, you know, finance people say to me legitimately, like, well, we could not pay support and take the risk of we need some patch and we can't get it, but the system will still run. Like, it's in our data center. So AI feels a little different cloud to me, not so much the beginning.
Well, I think it started off as I shared, you must be doing AI. We need projects. We want them now. Now the conversation with boards and executives is what is the use case? What is it going to take? The data privacy concerns, security concerns come up. The boards I interact with all have had experience with various failures in and around it. They're better educated than they were 2 years ago. So it is definitely slowed, but the interest level is very high. It has to be a strong use case that drives the business forward. Transcription of meetings isn't enough.
So with VMs, there was a very well-defined value proposition. And that is you have a data center, you can have it be at somebody else's data center and pay for a portion instead of paying for the whole thing. With AI, is anybody here can say what the exact value proposition is? I mean, there's all these different things it can do. And a lot of things it is delivering value on already. But it could be making it to where this microphone is sounding better. We're in a Zoom meeting where it's making it to where you can better see us because it's modulating better. You know, there's all these different places where AI is going to be used across the board. And we still haven't figured out all those places that will deliver value. A lot of the tools out there right now aren't delivering value. They have a promise of future value. There's some tools right now that are delivering massive amounts of value. We don't realize how much value they're delivering yet. So it's going to be a very different transition, I think, than to the cloud transition because of that. And it's probably going to come in waves as there's new discoveries of how value can be generated using AI in different areas.
We have a question from online.
All right, one online question.
So from our online user, we have a question of what tools are you using for monitoring to ensure no restricted data is being used outside your AI restricted environment?
We haven't even gotten to the security part yet.
Oh.
We're still talking that.
Jumping ahead. Good question.
All right, bring that one back. We'll talk build versus buy, then we'll jump into security if that works for everybody, because I'm making this up on the spot.
Yeah, I have one just comment.
Sure.
Very interesting thing. We compare cloud migration with the AI migration, but there are, like, for example, the Copilot has got a model, built-in model, where you can convert from one AI provider, whatever is the bedrock or migration. So that's they are already ahead of it. So the adoption is kind of snap of a finger. At least that's what they promise. Right. Minus the security, and I'm not going to.
Yeah. So for those online, if you couldn't hear me a second ago, we'll get into the security piece. We're just kind of still setting the stage a little bit. You know, it's 3 sessions of hot A summer. We don't want to jump right to security, what everyone wants to see. I want to still talk kind of a little more on the high end, and I think one of the big questions that I've raised, with my company is build versus buy. We first got a lot of the executives together and a lot of the brainchilds in different areas and different organizations, the architects, to build this entire list of things where this is where it could work. And then, we had this huge list and they're like, okay, we're going to go build all this. And then usually someone on that team Googled something. They're like, I found something, and especially, as I mentioned, for our pharmacy is a very, very, very specific area, and they had very odd things to overcome, medical, electronic records, all that stuff. And a lot of their systems are just kind of antiquated. I mean, these guys still use faxes, man. It's rough. Like, I kind of almost enjoyed working at a software company. I knew the issues, like fax, making sure that, people's PHI doesn't stick through an envelope, things I don't think about all the time. But so build versus buy became a very interesting thing for us. And it's also, where's that security? Where's that third party risk? But also we're trying to balance that go to market. Like what is going to make everyone happy? Do we have to hire another 10 people this year, or do we implement AI right now? Like in certain cases, not a lot, that makes sense. But build versus buy, like what are you guys talking to your clients about?
It's a lot of course, use cases first, use cases side. It's a lot of exactly how much money are we talking about? So you can make a solution that's a custom solution from ground data center up and everything super shiny exactly how you want it, but you're investing significant zeros behind some of that. Whether it's the resourcing underneath it, right? The data centers, the processing, whatever you need there, the engineering to actually make all of that happen, all the data, and then like all the security that needs to go on top of all of that. That's a lot of zeros that you're kind of architecting in. And so absolutely, there are more than many companies that will help you spend all of those zeros and create something from scratch. More often than not, we don't have unlimited budgets, and we have to look at what's going to make the most for us right now. We usually see more customers. We see very, very few go to build out everything. We see many more looking at, this is exactly what I wanted to do. There are AI vendors that are getting to be more verticalized as well. So especially actually going deeper into national specifically, because that's actually a different set of regulations, right? So you have more vendors that are seeing this need, right? And saying, okay, we can't necessarily give you an out-of-the-box solution. We can give you the underlying software of it. We can give you professional services to help you develop it and maintain it. A lot of vendors out here also are going to be able to say, we could tie some of that custom development engineering in with the data center that you now have to purchase out of, right? So kind of tying some of these different services in. So it helps it a little bit more become more obtainable. So one way or another, we need it, right? So there are different ways that you can do that depending on your investment. It's still a significant investment either way. But if you want custom, you're spending minimum probably 1.3. To build out your own.
And then half the time you won't even know the full cost of processing until it's ran for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I would say for us, we were in a little, so we had already built a high performance computing cluster on the research side internally with a fair number of NVIDIA GPUs. So we leveraged some of that capacity for an internal research focused AI product. The advantage was you control everything. So if you want significant security, you can put that in place. If there's effort involved in To your point, there were 2 commas in the total cost. It's probably specific to that year, but it was a lot of capital dollars. But we also, for testing and for spinning things up, and for a lot of use cases, we also purchased ChatGPT work and also Copilot work, as I talked about before. So it was a little bit of a hybrid, similar to our cloud play. Is that, but if we weren't doing so much genomics research and so much very high compute need and very the kind of research that our researchers said, we really want something both dedicated and ridiculously low latency, sub 1 millisecond. It is right, it's down in building 5. So that was, but then you get into, you gotta back it up. So we were shipping those data off to Arizona, and we spent a lot of money.
So I might be biased because I've been working for software companies for a good handful of years now. But one interesting thing about working for a software company is we have a bunch of SMEs who are very well tailored towards delivering a certain experience in software. And trying to replicate that internally with internal employees can be very challenging. You don't have the wide spectrum of voices from the customer base. Like if we have 30 different customers that we're talking to, helping us shape a product, then we can build something that will help solve a problem across a bunch of different companies instead of trying to custom build something specifically purpose built for a company. That and a lot of in-house teams have a tendency to build forms engines, and forms engines are things of the past. Nobody's going to use them anymore. It's the cheapest way to go, but nobody likes clicking in boxes and entering data all day long. AI is making all that obsolete.
Yeah, I think the trend has certainly been towards build. There are some, in my area, some interesting SaaS vendors that are at Series A state that have, I think, a lot of potential, especially if you're accessing public data sources and such, that they're building the integrations for you, which you would need to do yourself. But I think we're getting to the point where SaaS applications have the potential to take off. It is still a bit to be seen. There is a lot of costs, a lot of management behind the scenes. So if you're a smaller size company, certainly Abzena, we do not be capable of hiring the skill sets necessary to do this. We would have to at least partner with a third-party build and have them manage it. And getting, Alex and I were talking about this at the start, getting those skill sets is difficult. Those people right now are in demand. And so just why do they want to go work for a small company when they can have more opportunities and more breadth of experiences? Yeah. Apparently Zuckerberg's giving out big checks.
Bonuses are high.
Yeah. Facebook pays a lot up there. His friends in the Bay, like, oh, just come out here. I'm like, yeah. So build versus buy. I mean, I agree. So where our company's kind of looking at it, right, is the one area we decided to build was around our pharmacy. It's all PHI. It's all patient information. We're building, it's inside of our own Azure Copilot environment. We're building it out there. It's for overtaking that manual insurance process I mentioned. It's going to be, they're very excited. It's something we're doing. Legal team. Our legal team is like, could it be easier to review these contracts and make sure the contracts have things in the right spot? We have a template. This is the contract supposed to look like. We can compare that template with other things coming in for whatever small company the pharmacy picks up. That was awesome. That was a great buy. And then we have like one other category I didn't really put in, but maybe kind of think about it is we do not have necessarily all the people that are like super strong software. We're a distribution company. We do have some SaaS tools. They're small. We have some pretty good data guys. And we have a lot of data in, and some our ERP system and our data lake. And those two tools also have AI built on top of them. So it's a little bit of a hybrid of kind of building that piece out. I wouldn't quite call it platform as a service-ish. I don't know what they want to call it, but that's an area that we're looking at. Like, oh, well, all our sales numbers can just be exported from Salesforce over to Databricks, and then we can just do all the sales stuff there, right? And get all that information we need but the team with the data science team has to work with that team. So it's kind of in between. And I think that's probably, you know, where we're going to feel the investment plus, you know, time spent is going to give us the biggest return in that kind of middle tier. Any other comments to add? Security questions are next. Does anyone want a question around build versus buy, or do we need to just jump into the security stuff? Question? Go ahead. Yes.
So I'm using AI extensively. We're getting 3 to 5x return. I cut at least one FTE. But something very concerning came up. So when you ask the AI, ChatGPT and Google, is this information I'm putting in being recorded? It says no. It says it's not. And then you keep asking, it says, well, if you go to your notebook, it's there, but you can delete the contents of notebook. But then today, the founder of OpenAI has an article in reputable media saying there is no privacy, even with your private paid accounts. This is very disturbing because people are going to paste things with passwords in them accidentally and proprietary company data accidentally and HR privacy related things and HIPAA privacy things. And you have no way to get it out. And they can hand it over to anyone with a court order. They're required to. And so I was talking to my director with your peer, and normally he's very upbeat. And when I explained it to him, he said, is that actually true? I showed him the article. He goes, this is very, very bad. And I never heard him say something like that before. And I don't know what to do. I mean, maybe we have to get our own on-premise AI and run our own and train our own models because we don't have any.
If you have to know, that's the only way. I mean, no. That's probably.
I mean, the question becomes, is it worth the return on your productivity gain to deal with the fact that despite them lying to you and telling you have privacy, that you have no right to privacy?
I suspect that CEO's general counsel said, I need you to say this as if we ever get sued, we can play that tape for everybody in the jury. I bet anybody in here 100, what was Sam Altman who said that? Yeah, so I'm going to bet whoever the general counsel is at OpenAI said, Sam, say that. In my opinion.
Excuse me. I know we all have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. I can't ask any questions. We are close to 7 o'clock. So we'll have to speed up things, cut short, or something like that. Do you all want to stay here at 8:30, 9 o'clock?
I saw a 7:15 on schedule, so I was timing that. So we're gonna do the security piece.
Doing a second time check.
Are you guys having fun? So speaking about the privacy and all that stuff, I mean, in productivity, like I have the same thing every time. Like, do we really need all these people working for our company? Because all they're doing is causing all these. No, but no, like that's a great transition into kind of the security side. There's a million things to worry about. One thing that I've spent more time thinking about is like, how do I get in front of it? Because there's a lot of everyone's selling a tool to get in front of it, and some are very narrow, and some's like, oh, well, you're using Copilot. Well, I got this tool. It's just going to protect Copilot. And I'm like, yeah, but there's all these other things out there. You're like, oh, and then some other company you come in, you talk to like a Big Four type firm, and they'll be like, well, you guys don't have a data governance and data dictionaries and the data retention. You need all these things first before you even step into it. So there's given the time crunch that we're being pushed on from our executive teams or strategists. Like how do you guys think, like how do we step into this? Like where do we start? What makes sense? I mean, I can tell you where I'm going now, but I'm gonna let you guys kind of start with it.
So in my personal opinion, it's 100% strategy. So part of it is understanding what is our data that we have to protect. So you can't protect everything all the time, right? Your users are going to be doing all kinds of crazy nonsense, especially if students, for example. all kinds of things online. Again, what can you protect? So at a minimum, what is our sensitive data? Some customers that we talk to don't even really know what exactly their IP is, what exactly their PII is, where else can it live? Code, we also consider code, right? Generally they're in repos, but they're also like living on developer desktops and sometimes, and that's how you submit. So where is our sensitive data? And then if all we can afford is to protect and track that little bit of sensitive data, that's okay, right? If that's still part of our journey, that's still where we need to go. There are 100% solutions you can have if all we're needing to do is track that sensitive data and make sure that it doesn't leave our borders. There are tools to help you gateway some of these. So if you are already full on into ChatGPT, into whatever your choose your model, right? The tools are on top of that, like Juniper notebooks and things like that, that also help process a lot of this. There are gateways that you can put that behind, that you have to log in to that gateway. There are RBAC controls, right? Role-based access controls that are behind that to say this is where you can access it. This is where it's allowed to leave. Nothing should be attached to emails. Nothing can be copied and pasted. I've had some customers go as far as and very, very granular firewall controls to block every single possible way that their data could get out from personal email addresses to social media. So there absolutely are ways to do that. It's an investment, right? So ideally, if you want to get in front of it, let's talk about data sources. Let's talk about what do we need to protect. Let's get in tracking that data. And then let's talk about specific AI models. So you can't ask, for example, you can't ask AI to validate itself. It's going to be like, oh yeah, everything's fine. It's totally great. Always use me. And then you're like, well, no, it's 100%, guided by something else. And we're starting to get kind of crazy data back. So in order to get ahead of that as much as possible, plan, strategize, and start understanding if all we can afford is protect this one thing, how can we at least carry that across the finish line to help save us a lot of risk on the other end?
Just add to what Melanie said, it's really all about risk tolerance. And it's about thinking about what data do you really care about, and having an honest conversation with yourself or your supervisor. What happens if are these other data really crucial? Because the natural tendency is to want to protect everything, but you'll never get off the ground. I mean, it's believe me, I've tried it. It's just too big. It's just, you just have to decide what's really important, and if that's a small enough target that you can actually tackle it, then you go down that road. And then in general, on the build versus buy, I just had a thought after that, and sort of circle back to that for a second. In general, I start with can I do it with buy? And then if I can't do it with buy, then I think about build. Sort of like the cloud, described like, can I do it there easily? Because you get such a fast startup. But anyway, back to the original question, the real question we're asking now is, it's about risk tolerance. You've just got to think about that and what happens if those data are exposed. And you decide what risk you're willing to take.
So certainly strategy, what data are you going to use, the governance around the data or lack thereof. What worries me the most is when I'm speaking to executives and I want AI everywhere now. That is not a recipe for success, and you're certainly going to have gaps that you're not going to find out about initially. Tailoring the strategy to some leading use cases that are really going to present clear business value, and investing in them and having success to help fuel the less exciting things, the 4-letter words like governance and such that you do need to invest in.
You don't understand what data you have, and you don't understand where it is, never to protect it. Doesn't matter whether it's AI or anything else. So having good data governance, having classification system, understanding where the important crown jewels are, putting walls around that, definitely a strategy you need to put in place or protect your data.
Yeah, jumping on that. So another thing I experience almost daily is, now that we're taking a really bad human process and we're going to add AI, it needs to be perfect. So you're just like, we don't know where all the data is. We don't know how many copies of it. Well, AI is going to figure all that out, and it's going to be perfect because we're adding AI. And so, the part of Melanie's strategy comment, it's setting the proper expectations.
And very briefly, sorry.
No problem.
And I would say, when you say, where is your data, you also have to understand, is someone putting data in their personal GitHub that you don't know about? So it's kind of an unfair, it's unreasonable to expect you to know where something is when it's done secretly. Has certain connotations when you're not told about it. So you have to find a way to know even when they don't tell you, because people get busy or whatever, and for whatever reason they put it in their personal GitHub, and that's
Trying to get their job
problem.
done. Sure.
That's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much. It would be awesome to have great governance in place. It'd be awesome to have everything labeled. But I can tell you, I mean, obviously we're 100% secure. So like Phantom company, not where I work. Some people still have problems labeling data. Like they keep labeling things as like, I just use not classified. I'm like, why? Well, it's the first one on the list. I'm like,
Because it has the fewest controls.
and I'm like, so now yeah. And I'm like, all right, can we just put internal as the first one? Like it's just one of those things where people just, they're just going through it. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe the AI can go label everything for it, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, because we're a pharmaceutical distribution company. So think about it. We're emailing drug name or physically mailing drug name to person at address. And so like by default, if I look into, like we do email like a notice that it's got shipped and stuff like that, I see in my DLP monitor that says person, medicine, HIPAA. And it's like, no, this is a shipment, so like there's a lot that we'd have to do with training.
Sure.
And I think that is one key piece that, for where I've decided to go with it, for those, the person on the phone that asked about monitoring solutions. I mean, I've every time in the past I've tried to mess with DLP since Digital Guardian and stuff back in the days, like it's just a pain because again, the labeling, the things like that. How do you train people? And I think that training piece is like one of the most important. I mean, we can do it by security champion. You can do different things, different tools out there, whether they be DLP type, DSPM type solutions or secure browsers or different ways to look at things. They can tell users like, hey, I think that looks like a social security number. Maybe you shouldn't post it there. Here's our AI policy why you shouldn't. If they go to ChatGPT, instead of just blocking it completely, or try to go to their Google Drive, instead of blocking it completely, it's like, hey, by the way, our policies don't go here because we're trying to secure our customers' data. Go team. Like those are a lot of things there where I think that piece where you have that rollout with your pilot group and test these controls, make sure it's not way too annoying that it doesn't pop up every time they try to do every single thing every day. So they don't just tell you to shut it off and stop bothering people and let them get their work done. But like kind of work that up. I think that training piece is so key to kind of really help those people understand it. Because it's really not, again, like I mentioned, like helping people to use Google and that you shouldn't post things on the internet because people will find that. People understand that it's not a big jump. You just got to get their brain wrapped around it because they're just trying to get their job done, and go have really nice Mexican food for lunch, like. Or wherever they live, Any other comments real quick before we take the last round of questions before we wrap up here? All right, questions, here we go.
Implementing AI in a systematic way, like we have ITSM, ITIL, PMP, all these other methodologies. So did you guys come across any promising frameworks? I know it's barely getting started though.
NIST has their AI one, which I think would be the most relevant probably since it's going to pretty easily map over to all the rest of them. So what are you already doing for your security side that can map over to how we need to think about it on the AI side? So NIST, of course, one of the leading ones here in the US. There are some other people who are also, right, when we look at international regulations, doing some super interesting things. I usually just default to NIST. MITRE is also creating their specific AI when we think about TTPs, right? Normal tactics, techniques, and procedures for other kinds of security incidents. So MITRE is also having one for AI. So that also helps us think, well, if we do something inside of this, where could that actor go? And so just thinking, how do we protect that certain area of our network? How do we track and monitor that? And making sure that our decisions inside of our technologies are all kind of going toward those. But if you already have a lot of frameworks guiding your decisions, I'd probably say stick to this mostly and Wired.
I use this exclusively. Shortest answer I've given tonight. I use this. Now, I'm sure there are others, but I use this.
I would say it depends on whether you're a consumer or you're a builder. Because it really changes the frameworks that are available to you that you want to use. So for example, if you're building using something like 600-1 makes a lot of sense, but if you're just a consumer, maybe you see like a few things for that, but you don't necessarily need to go full on it. So when you're building, there's a lot of considerations you need to have. For example, you need to make sure there's a inherent bias in it. You have to make sure it has proper execution domains for data, and a whole bunch of different things. But as a consumer, you can shift all that responsibility on somebody else and just make sure that they are crossing their T's, dotting their I's.
How about if it is a hybrid, because the adoption of the AI and every from R&D that vision. Yeah, and most of the companies are building, especially medium-sized companies. But it's because they need to find it. Can't just take an LLM and start using it as it is, right? You can do the prompt engineering, the fine tuning, the various, the forms of the adoption of the AI. So how do you deal with that kind of situation?
I'd say you look at the cloud and you have that shared responsibility model. Ultimately, there should be lines drawn in the sand for what you're responsible for and what your provider is responsible for. So if it's a hybrid model and they say you're responsible for everything, which is fairly common, then you are. You have to make sure that you do those things. But as a smaller company, it's really great. We can have somebody else, be the ones responsible for a lot of that. So we look for contractual obligations to make sure they are.
All right, do we have any questions online? All right, one more from the crowd here before it's online. All right, go ahead.
Hi, yes, I believe it was David who mentioned about an executive messaging, that they want AI everywhere now. So I want to kind of take that as an example of what kind of dynamic I know. I guess in this current innovation cycle, and I guess kind of a bit of a comparison question with previous innovation cycles, such as IoT, cloud, or .com, etc. What would you say is the current landscape you as you're more on the cybersecurity side of things versus the the ethos of, again, that phrase that you mentioned, CEO, of the software and technology, etc. Ethos of move fast and break things, whereas I guess if I had to say philosophy, cybersecurity side of slow down and fix things. What would you say? Because that's putting examples, all the stuff that happened with the IoT, cloud, etc. Perhaps a comparison question. What would you say that balance currently look like of prioritizing security or prioritizing or moving progress?
Yeah,
and market share, et cetera,
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about it, like bigger versus smaller companies, right? But I mean, that CEO, that CTO, that their job is that big picture, like, let's go, we're hitting the moon, and like, hey, the moon's kind of far, or well, people can't breathe in space. There's things that we have to remind them of and kind of align them and guide them. But as you said, like it's AI or die. I love that comment. For smaller companies, like if we could edge that, make that much more revenue without hiring that many more people, that's huge. Like headcount is really, really expensive. The more you start managing people, the more you start managing a budget. Headcount is the biggest expense in a lot of ways. So because there's training, there's healthcare, there's a lot of things that tie into. You just see that salary. There's a whole slew of things that tie behind that. So headcount's expensive. So my opinion there is that, you're just gonna have to have that conversation with the business, and it's depending on the size, depending on the risk appetite, if you can get them to tell you risk appetite, that's it. Next time we do an ERM, just let me know. We'll talk about that.
But I think the other in this tonight's discussion, a lot of the points come up. Like Alex, you raised it. You just don't use AI in production. You start in development. You have human stop gates where you're reviewing the results and the outputs of it. You don't. Eric mentioned and Billy also about HIPAA data and other sensitive data. So you have to build your own internal experience. The users need to be trained. It's a journey, and that's back to having a plan and what are the returns and where are we going to start to gain that experience, and preferably that's in a less risky area. But you also see that in the data too, where there's a lot of pilots, a lot of successful pilots, but then they don't flip into production. And that's probably maybe another session. But it's back to the plan and having the right human stop gates to ensure that the model's really doing what you believe it's doing.
It's also way better to offset that risk, right? Kind of back to the build versus buy. If you're hosting your own internally and you're hosting your own LLMs, for example, and you're developing them and you're being very excited about that, those are going to be more of attack places, right? So if you're offsetting that risk to a third party, to a SaaS provider, to an AI provider in someone else's cloud that they're responsible for, it's a little bit cheaper, right? Than you having to put all that extra set of security tools and layers specifically on this part of your enterprise, this part of your company. So offsetting that's a little bit cheaper because it will be a little bit more expensive because it will be more of a target, right? So security wise, lots of layers all the time, always. But more so if you're hosting it internally, you're looking for it to be more of an investment there.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully, if you guys, we're all on LinkedIn because I sent invitations to those I didn't know. So, like, if you guys have more questions, find us on LinkedIn, shoot us notes, and we'll be here to respond. I'm going to let David close us out.
Well, thank you to Billy, this moderator, and all the panelists. And I really appreciate everybody coming out today. It's one of the bigger educational events that we've done. So definitely keep coming back. Make sure you register for next month's events. They're both on the website already. So definitely check that out. It's on the upcoming events page, so very easy to find. And yeah, we have the room kind of indefinitely, but don't stay past 8. But feel free to get up and network, meet some new faces. Challenge to everybody is just meet 3 people you've never met before you leave. So thank you again.